Hi, David Mechanic. He can't hear me. Hi, David Mechanic. He's not hearing me.
Hey, David, can you hear us? Director Mechanic, can you please confirm that you can hear us?
Yeah, I hear you. Some other voices were very low, though.
Low.
There she is.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Are we expecting anyone else? And we have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good afternoon. My name is Michael English. I'm the president and chair of the Tampa Historic Streetcar Board of Directors. Welcome to the January 19th, 2022 regular Board of Directors meeting. This is a hybrid format meeting. Quorum is physically present at the Hart Administrative Offices at 1201 East 7th Avenue Boardroom, and the rest of the board members are participating via communication media technology. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, please? I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
President English,
Present.
Director Ahern,
Present.
Director Hardy,
Present.
Director Johnson,
Present.
Director Mechanic,
Present.
Director Schisler,
Here.
Director Williams. You have quorum.
The next item on our agenda is public input. Is there anyone pre-registered who wishes to comment? Seeing none, I'd like to welcome our newest board member, Gil Schisler, who is a member of the Hart Board and the Temple Terrace City Council, and I think I read that you're the vice mayor.
Yeah.
That's great. We're really happy to have you with us.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I could no longer hear Mike English.
I've got both microphones on, Lena. I would also like to recognize the reappointed members, Eric Johnson and Melanie Williams. Councilmember Vieira and members Vieira and Tyler Hudson were appointed as Hart Board alternates to the THS Board of Directors as well at a recent Hart Board meeting. The next item on our agenda is approval of minutes, which have been provided in your packet. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections anyone would like to make?
Motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Johnson,
Seconded.
second by Mr. Hardy. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. We now arrive at really the only important item on our agenda, which is the Csx Insurance Policy. Graham Mielek, could you come forward, please, and kind of explain where we are?
Yes, sir. As I promised you this time, this is the non-LASIK version, so everyone should be able to see it clearly.
Thank you.
Second page.
Okay, a few things have transpired in the past 24 hours, and this is why I kind of wanted to abbreviate and show you exactly where we are. On the first one, you'll see the bottom, a total premium of $598,381 plus taxes and fees. That was supposed to be today's proposal. At 10 o'clock last night, I got an email from Brian Frost, who's our rail, basically our rail expert. And he informed me that Gemini Underwriters, who has never really given us the time of day, contacted him saying, we would like to go ahead and basically throw out some numbers and see if we can be a part of THS's program. Typically, I would not allow that so late in the game, especially since we started marketing this in October. But from the numbers that they've been telling us we can do, we could be potentially looking at a $40,000 decrease.
Excellent.
By bringing Gemini on board, and as you can see, with your papers, the price per million and so forth, we have to now redo this entire, layer. And so that's why we couldn't just go ahead and plop Gemini in. Because as you remember, when we first started doing this, you need to have the price per million in a linear order. Because if you don't, then the whole layer's out of whack. So that's right now what we're doing. They've assured me that within 4 days, we'll have everything complete. Again, this is a little embarrassing that we were ready to go last night, but to wait 4 days for $40,000, I think is way worth it.
So Grant, the total premium was $598,381,
Plus taxes and fees.
and this would reduce that by $40,000 approximately.
We believe so.
Yeah.
Maybe even more, because as I said, the layering, it's all like puzzle pieces. You have to find out which carrier wants to play in this specific area, and you have to make sure that the price per million is linear.
I understand. I have a couple of questions, but before I ask mine, does anybody else have questions of Mr. Mielek?
I
So-
do.
Go ahead, please.
I know there were some discussions of a reduction of the requirements from CSX. How did that conversation go?
The relationship of CSX and us and THS, and with me personally, is very well compared to what it's been. They are kind of in a wait and hold pattern due to what's going on with Brightline. It's my understanding that they also have, they have somebody in Tallahassee who is working on the sovereign immunity clause, which essentially is all CSX wants. Like, I spoke to the lead attorney last week at CSX, and he's like, if the city of Tampa will offer us sovereign immunity, we'll drop these crazy limits tomorrow. Speaking with Dave, sovereign immunity is something that is very touchy. But within my discussions with CSX, with Dave, and with also somebody from Ballard Partners, it looks like legislation is going to be introduced that for private, public entities, or they're called PP3s, basically for those kind of setups, sovereign immunity may be afforded to that public or that private entity. And if that's the case, then all these limits go away. Well, not all of them.
But that requires special legislation at the least from the legislature. And I'm going to ask Mr. Smoker to comment on this too, because it's probably more complicated than that. But that's your bottom line, is it? We're still at 75?
We are still at 75.
So our premium hasn't really gone down much this year either, I assume. It looks to me like it has not gone down yet.
Not yet. Keep in mind right now that we're in one of the hardest insurance markets ever seen. I'm sure anyone who owns property has seen it. It's also spilling over to all the other lines. For instance, the board's PREA policy, the public entity policy shot up 25%. You're seeing this across all lines of coverage right now.
Interesting. So, this needs to be executed before our next meeting, board meeting. So, Mr. Smoker, I'd like your opinion about how we handle this, please.
Yeah, I would suggest a motion.
Speak up to the microphone, please.
Can you hear me? I would suggest a motion, and the motion would be two parts. The first part would be to approve the current offer and authorize the chairman to accept it on behalf of the board. And that would be the 598-381 sheet that has been provided to you. The second part of the motion would be that if we receive a better offer that's at a lower amount for the same level of coverage, that the board approve it in advance and authorize the chairman to accept it on behalf of the board.
It's almost guaranteed that we're going to have a completely different program and a cheaper program with better coverage. It's almost guaranteed.
So that would be the
Comments from
recommended
any-
motion.
Any questions or comments from board members?
I have a question about the sovereign immunity, but that is not really directed to this motion. I'd like to ask that after, I guess, we vote on this. But
And your fee remains the same as last year, Mr. Mealy?
No, my fee would be $40,000.
So it's a reduction.
The fees are reduction from last.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Any other questions? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion based upon Mr. Smoker's advice so that I can authorize what the best deal we're going to get, which needs to happen in the next week or pretty quick.
It's going to be done by the end of this week.
Yeah.
I'll do the motion to, for the chairman to accept the insurance policy of 598-381 on behalf of the board. And if the premium is reduced, to then further accept the reduced premium, or, yeah.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Thank you, Ms. Doring Ahern. Any other discussion? If not,
yeah, well, yeah, I would just comment, I think Mr. Spoker advised that the secondary proposal would be at a reduced price, but for at least the same coverage. I mean, I would suggest respectfully that the motion state that it is with the same or better coverage.
do the motion makers and second agree with that?
Yeah,
I'll amend the, oh, go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion to it.
Thank-
I would amend unless Mr. Hardy would like.
No, that's
to be able
fine.
to-
So
That's
Mr.
fine.
Johnson has amended the motion. Do we have a second, please?
Second?
We have a second from Ms. Ahern Doring. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Excellent. Thank you so much. Don't leave, because there may be more things in
Mr.
our
Chairman.
conversation about this.
Is Mr. Smoker going to get, I don't know if we want to talk about this during the legislative report that he will have regarding the sovereign immunity discussion, if we want to be able to take that up now, or if we want to wait until his report.
I'd really,
Your pleasure.
we could talk about it right now if you'd like, sure.
Well, I was just kind of, I mean, you just kind of like, or that was just brought up, so I would kind of be interested to be able to see what your thoughts are, or at least get an update on what you were
Yeah,
referring
this
to.
is something that is worth taking a deep dive on. CSX is basically telling us, look, if we can get, CSX can get sovereign immunity, then the limits of their liability would be capped at $250,000 per person and $300,000 per event. And so they would love to have that, and if they could get sovereign immunity, our premium would be dramatically reduced, obviously. Now, the problem is that sovereign immunity is a legislatively determined grant. It's a waiver of immunity. In other words, traditionally, the king can do no wrong, and so the king couldn't be liable for damages. The Florida legislature has waived sovereign immunity for governmental entities and quasi-governmental entities. Technically, CSX is not a governmental entity or a quasi-governmental entity. So it would take, I believe, it would take an amendment to general law, to the statutes, to allow for them to have that kind of immunity. Another possibility might be that you could get a special act that would be just specific to either CSX or possibly even individual circumstances where you have CSX crossings. I haven't dove that deeply into it yet, but I intend to. Obviously, if there's some way that CSX could enjoy sovereign immunity with our rail crossing, that's a gigantic savings of money each year.
Mr. Mealy?
And actually, one more thing I'd like to follow up with that. One more thing I'd like to follow up with that is you're correct about the sovereign immunity and how that is a high hurdle. The other option would be that they also would like to be indemnified. That opens up another can of worms, but that feasibly could be simple if they are boxed in just to their diamond crossings.
Yeah. My understanding of the law, and I researched this a couple of years ago, and I'm assuming it hasn't changed, and that is that local governments like the city of Tampa are not allowed to indemnify, except up to the extent that they may purchase insurance. And so we're sort of already kind of in that mode already. In other words, we're purchasing insurance. The problem is that the amount of coverage that is being demanded by CSX is so large. I mean, they're looking at it on a rail network basis rather than just an individual crossing basis. So I can dig in a little bit deeper on that, but the last time I researched that in a different context was that the local governments cannot indemnify private parties.
I'm just giving them feedback, just from the
Yeah.
conversation.
No.
Mr. Chairman?
Again, it's possible that the legislature ultimately
Mr. Johnson?
gets to make these calls.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, if we're talking about, so you told me that, or based on what you said earlier, that there's already been a conversation with somebody from Ballard about that there is a sovereign immunity discussion being, I guess, had right now. David, you're telling me that, there is a indemnification issue that we're gonna have to worry about as well, correct?
I think the two are actually separate. If you could get the legislature to grant sovereign immunity to CSX, either in our situation or similar situations, or generally, then you wouldn't be worried about indemnification,
Well,
because
here's the thing, we're already in week 2 of session, so if there isn't an actual, the conversation that is either happening or that is, at least moving forward, then I'm going to automatically assume that nothing is happening.
That's correct.
yeah, and
I just don't think that, yeah, we can have conversations all day, in Tallahassee, but if there hasn't already been something that is already at least being discussed, and I don't know who this person is at Ballard that is actually, saying that they're going to do something. I mean, they've got an excellent reputation, and I think that they've got they certainly have the opportunity to be able to get to the folks that are gonna have to have this conversation, but I'm just not, if we're talking about anything that's gonna be happening legislatively, I'm gonna just have to assume that it is not gonna happen at this point.
No, absolutely.
The part about Ballard, I approached Ballard, they're actually in the office. But the main point I was making.
So you're using the Tampa office when you say that you're talking to Ballard?
Correct,
Okay.
for strategic reasons. But I do know for a fact that CSX and their lobbyist is working on something, and they're working on it with Brightline.
Okay, good.
in
So-
my experience, something like this, which is maybe a little bit off the wall from a legislative standpoint, the strategy might be to identify, and I hate to use the analogy, but a legislative train that has a lot of momentum and see if there's a way to,
David,
I'm aware of how that part
David,
works, so.
get close to the microphone,
I'm
please.
sorry.
So
Yeah.
I'm assuming it would be some kind of a, an amendatory deal they were trying to look at. And
Yeah, that would be the strategy. And
which is fine, I don't think, obviously, we're not looking at standalone bills at this point, so if it's an amendatory issue, then great.
No.
Let's figure out a way to be able to try and do this, but
Yeah.
Right.
this is also not some small issue that we are trying to be able to tuck tiny amendments into.
No.
So.
Right.
But
No,
and-
it would
and-
be a big deal.
Let me please sort of put the bigger perspective on this. This isn't going to happen overnight. It's way too late for this year's legislature to do anything for us, I fully believe. The bigger point here is the conversation of sovereign immunity, which really needs to be researched and discussed with Hart's General Counsel, the City Attorney's Office, Mr. Melnick, and whomever else needs to be involved. And I can assure you the Florida Department of Transportation is going to ultimately be involved in this as well, because they are involved in other ways to relieve rail systems in Florida of crossing liability insurance. The issue is really going to come to fore as well if we pass a referendum again this year in November and it's upheld by the courts. We're talking at the moment about a streetcar extension with 2 more crossings. I understand that you've constructed this contract that would technically allow them, and I appreciate your creativity. My whole point is we need to be thinking about this, and Hart's General Counsel and the City Attorney need to be fully aware of your research, Mr. Smoker, and our board needs to be kept apprised. But I want Hart to know what's going on. I want the city government to know what's going on. Mr. Melnick is our agent, but he is not responsible for making this move forward. He is cooperating with us, and his business connections have been very helpful to date in dealing with CSX, and he has a good relationship with them. But they're a very difficult company to deal with, and so how we're going to deal with them, particularly with the extension, is yet to be determined. Mr. Johnson?
And thank you for all the comments regarding making sure that Hart is going to be involved
Oh,
with
yeah.
this. I think it's imperative for us to be able to have their involvement
Oh.
between Ms. LeGrand, the board's council, the Hart Board's council as well.
Yes.
I think that is going to be something that we're going to have, and the ability for Hart to be able to go after some of the things that we're talking about, having it on their legislative agenda, and also having them involved and having their fingerprints on everything, I think is going to be critical for us to be able to move something as big as this. Let's face it, this is a very large issue. This is not something that is going to be just, our board being able to work on this to be able to get something moved. So the more people that we have involved to be able to try and get this argument, or at least get the discussion out there in public, I think is going to be good, critical for us. So I thank you for bringing Hart into this.
Oh, absolutely.
It's something we need to be able to
Yeah, David
find
Smith.
a way to do.
Yeah, your in-house counsel can help track it, Ms. LeGrand, but David Smith needs to know exactly what's going on as well. He's a very experienced attorney and understands Hart very well legally. So, yes. Mr. Smoker, I would really like you to figure out how to sort of initiate this conversation with Mr. Smith, in-house counsel if Ms. LeGrand so desires, the city attorney, and keep Mr. Mielek in the loop, please. And hopefully over the next year, we may find a solution. We originally raised $6.8 million to create an endowment fund when we started this system. Every nickel of that fund has been used to pay for this crossing. It's just been painful every year to do. And nobody else really wanted to step up, so we happened to have the money and we did. Be that as it may, the problem really needs to be solved in a more efficient way if we're going to extend the system in any way. Thank you. Mr. Mealy?
Okay. Any other
Mr.
questions?
Chair,
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Chairman, I asked to speak on this issue.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I just, and most of what I wanted to say has sort of been touched on, but as the City of Tampa representative, I just want to make the point that, I mean, at one point, Mr. Melnick mentioned the idea of the city granting CSX sovereign immunity, which I don't think technically is what would happen. I think that would be more in the way of an indemnification is what was later discussed. But I think I would just want to express a great deal of concern about trying to shift any additional financial responsibility onto the city. The city is already a backer of the system under the tri-party agreement, but I don't imagine the city would be willing or interested in assuming greater liability than it already has. So these things have come up in the past with regard to the retention amount on the insurance, where we could have saved a premium by increasing the retention amount, but that would have created greater exposure with the City of Tampa, and so that idea was ruled out. I mean, this is going back maybe 8-10 years or something.
Right.
So I would just caution, any ideas that would attempt to shift more liability on the part of the city. But Mike, as you indicated, the city attorney needs to be fully plugged into this conversation, as well as Hart Legal Counsel. So I'm assured that nothing will happen that goes unnoticed with either of those agencies. So thank you.
Thank you, David. I think we all agree with you. Thank you, Mr. Malik.
Great.
Good
Any
day.
other questions? Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, let's move on to the streetcar system report. Mr. Allen?
Good afternoon, President English, members of the board, Ms. LeGrand. Brian Allen, Director of Streetcar Operations. For December, I'd like to start out with our ridership numbers. 101,401. It was the
Wow.
best ridership we've ever had for a December. Of those, 97 were ADA boardings. And I'd like to point out that New Year's Eve alone accounted for over 9,000 riders.
That's great.
So it was a pretty incredible month. We were busy every day practically. Our OTP, we had 17 reported late departures, for OTP being 99.59. We had 25 reported missed trips out of the 4,232 trips we made. 7.25 was caused by a split switch accident at South Centro up here in Ybor, where a motorman backed up through a switch and the car started to go up both tracks at the same time. He
Ooh.
stopped it. No damage to no injuries, no damage, but it did take a while to do the investigation. So that accounted for the long time for the missed trips. We lost 7 trips due to a power outage, 6.25 to a shortage of operators, and finally 4.5 trips to mechanical issues. The only other incident we had was on December 13th when a vehicle turned off 8th Avenue and drove down the tracks till they got stuck at the CSX interlocking. So, and other than that, we did provide 16.5 hours of extra service. All those were for the Winter Village Express. And infrastructure-wise, we hired 2 maintenance supervisors. Both those were internal promotions. And 2 motormen completed training on Christmas Eve. So currently I have 2 motorman positions open and a facility person.
Any questions from board members? It's a pretty good report. The ridership is great. I want to thank the streetcar staff for doing such great work. And I want to thank our board for underwriting the Winter Village Express, because it was a great success as well. And it is much appreciated by the public and the downtown partnership. Mr. Hardy?
Yes, I just wanted to say, 3 of those riders on New Year's Eve was myself and my 2 daughters, and every time I ride the streetcar, I'm just really impressed with the motormen and how they give out information, how they talk to people. There was a lot of people in there for the football game, a lot of people from out of state, and it was just a real pleasure to see how they added to the success of that event. So I just wanted to give kudos to them.
Thank you. I'll pass that along.
Thank you so much, Mr. Allen.
Thank you.
Legal and legislative reports, Mr. Smoker.
Yeah, I can give the board a little bit of update on the transportation sales tax status. Obviously, the extension of the streetcar system is going to depend in large part, likely, on the ability to pass a new 1-cent referendum sales tax for transportation. As you may recall, the Florida Supreme Court invalidated the prior referendum, not so much because the ballot language was problematic, but it also contained a charter amendment that delegated authority to entities other than the Board of County Commissioners to determine how the money should be spent, and that was not consistent with the
Stay
general
close to the
statute.
microphone, please, Mr. Smoker.
And that was not consistent with the current statute. So at this point, there was, so the county is now moving forward with a new initiative. They apparently are going to schedule it for November of 2022. They're having public meetings starting in February to take the temperature of the public. And near as I can tell, the new ballot language has not been drafted, but it's likely to pretty much remain the same. And then there also will be implementing ordinances, which my understanding is they have not been drafted, or at least if they have, they're not sharing it. My understanding is, from the intelligence I've been able to gather, is that the 54% county city, 45% Hart, and 1% other allocation will be preserved, which is should be good news. And the likely policy discussion at the county commission is going to be focused on whether you're going to spend the money on roads or whether you're going to spend it on mass transit. So that's kind of where things are with regard to a new referendum. The other item that's out there is the $521 million that was already collected. And the county has proposed that they use an application process that would be supervised and adjudicated by a 3-judge panel. And they had requested that Judge Barbas, who is the circuit court judge who made the original rulings with regard to the constitutionality of the referendum, would assume jurisdiction over that process. There's also been a class action lawsuit that's been filed in Tallahassee, where the lawyers are wanting to have the money refunded through a class action process. Judge Barbas is apparently going to be holding a roundtable discussion with the lawyers about whether he's going to accept jurisdiction and do it through the process that the county has proposed. And that's going to happen on January 26th. So we may start getting some sense of where this refund process is going to end up going. Another possibility is that the legislature could declare a sales tax holiday, in which case sales tax in Hillsborough County would not be collected until $523 million had been of a holiday had been effectuated. So it's still really up in the air. It's something that it's very tricky as to figure out how to do it, but it's clear that the people of Hillsborough County wanted this money spent on transportation. So, it would be great if there's a way where you could have this money ultimately spent on transportation projects. But the problem that we have is that technically the Supreme Court held that it was void, and that means that technically the money was not legally collected and it has to be refunded to the payers. So You know, I'm going to give a little thought to it, but there really does need to be a creative solution, because that money is just sitting in the bank collecting interest, you know, with the clerk of the circuit court and the cities and the county, and the public wanted it spent on transportation. So we'll see how it all plays out.
Any questions? Thank you, David.
And that would conclude my report.
Thank you so much. I don't have a report. Ms. LeGrand?
Yes, quickly, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is having a good week. Just wanted to share with you that the Community Streetcar Coalition, I've mentioned them to you before, they're hosting their February virtual summit. So what that means is, you know, you can attend virtually via your computer. It's a Zoom meeting. And I just wanted to share the information, and I can make sure staff provides it to you as well.
That's great.
I will double check this, but I believe since Hart is a member of the Community Streetcar Coalition, our board members are also members of the coalition, and you should be able to just register online if you're interested. I'll quickly read what they're doing this year. So the focus is on funding, and we've been talking about funding today, grants, but there are also a lot of other opportunities with the infrastructure bill or infrastructure law now. However, there are other programs also in the pipeline to expand your current system, to help you improve operations. We're going to have the Federal Transit Administration as a speaker during the summit to talk about funding. Beth Day, who's over the CIG grant program, she's going to speak at the summit. So there should be some opportunities to really engage and find out, you know, information. The summit is Wednesday, February 9th from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Central Time. So I believe if that's Central, we're before, right? So if it's 12 Central, that makes it,
We were an hour earlier.
right, so we'd be 11? No, we'd be 1. Okay. So quick time change, Matthew.
Yeah, I'd be very
Okay.
interested, by the way.
So from 1 to 3 o'clock on February 9th. Like I said, it is a Zoom link. I'll make sure that staff sends it out to the board members here. And that's my only update. I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that. And I know for their in-person summit, which will be a little later in the year, we did talk a bit about, you know, the opportunity for Tampa to present on our streetcar system. So again, if there's any information that we'd like to get from the Community Streetcar Coalition, just let me know, and I'll make sure we get that in front of the group.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, many of us might be very interested. I am, personally.
And then lastly, I'll say if there's enough of us, if we wanted to do the Zoom together here in this room, we can look at accommodating that as well. So just let us know how you'd like to move forward, and we'll make sure we're available
Thank
to
you.
make it happen.
It's very kind of you. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Vector Media Sales Activity Update. Mr. Tyler Rowland.
Good afternoon, President English, Board, Ms. LeGrand. As of December of 2021, we're a complete full year advertising revenue of $115,000 for the THS guarantee. There was no new business for the month of December. The current active advertisers on the line right now are the Tampa Bay Lightning, Miller Lite, Anheuser-Busch, Cigar City, Coors, Brooks Law, and Tampa General Hospital. And Vector is currently in conversations with DoorDash for a station sponsorship, as well as Cutwater, Chick-fil-A, Coca-Cola, and Diageo for streetcars and stations.
That's
So-
great. That's
So that
great.
concludes our report. If there's any questions.
Yes, Ms. Doring Ahern?
Hi. I was just hoping that we could plan in advance for this year to make sure that there's a vehicle available when it comes for Winter Village.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay, I know there was a little, we got it all sorted out, but there was a little bit of a hiccup there, so if we could just kind of have that on our radar and.
Sure.
I
We'll
think
make
it
sure-
starts Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we'll make sure we identify a car and a backup car beyond that. as well.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland.
Thank you.
We just now come to compliance reports. There is a marketing report for December 2021 in your packet. We do not have City of Tampa financial statements as they are undertaking an audit. for last year, so I would presume we'll see something perhaps in February. Is there any old business to take up? Seeing none, is there any new business to take up? Seeing none, I want to thank all of you for coming today. It's been a productive meeting, and Gil, we're really happy to have you here. So I